Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday, and that means Epic Comic Book Wednesday, when Michael K Vaughan and I combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we've wasted our youths. And today, we are going to a storyline that is completely dominated by a giant, world-devouring, unstoppable force. And it also features Galactus. The giant force in the 1980s was the fan favorite artist and writer John Byrne, who rocketed to fame with a whole bunch of different titles. He was already much in demand as a Marvel artist when he went to the X-Men. And he moved on to the Fantastic Four, Marvel's flagship book, the title with which Stan Lee started the Marvel Age of Comics, as writer and artist, and stayed there for a while. And I have never been all that big a fan of John Byrne. I like his work, but his artwork, that is. But I've never been all that big a fan of him. And of course, he is unforgivable for what he did when he was put in sole control of Superman. He could have refused, or could have told the powers that be at DC Comics, okay, I have plenty of ideas, but the ideas are respectful. They uphold canon. They improve canon. Nevertheless, if you have a writer and artist who's the same person on a comic and they're just given creative control of it, wonders can happen. And I am the first to admit, wonders happened on John Byrne's run on the Fantastic Four. He made it incredible. He made it something that you absolutely had to buy every month. There are no comics like that. There haven't been any comics like that in almost 15 years. He made it something that, from Marvel and DC, I should say. I've heard lots of good things about Titans Conan, but normal superhero comics, there hasn't been anything like that in a long time. Long enough to say goodbye to an entire generation of fans. In the 1980s, John Byrne made the Fantastic Four that book. And all while being respectful to canon. In fact, a little too respectful to canon. John Byrne has, like all other comic book writers who can feel the Grim Reaper getting closer, he tends to indulge in his own nostalgia. So he, for instance, made the Fantastic Four costumes look very much like the original versions, with huge black belts and huge black boots. And he also de-evolved the Thing, Benjamin J. Grimm, the ever-loving blue-eyed idol of millions. The Thing started out as a lumpy putty type creature in Fantastic Four #1, which we've talked about on this channel, much to the trauma of a lot of you. We've talked about Fantastic Four #1. The Thing started out looking like that, and gradually Jack Kirby gave him a more mosaic look, more of a rock-like look. And John Byrne decided, for nostalgia's sake, that he would revive that look, of that lumpy look of the Thing. No idea why, other than nostalgia. That would be it. But it didn't matter, because he was doing great work on the Fantastic Four. Just fantastic work. No pun intended. And if you're doing great work on the Fantastic Four, no matter who you are, you're going to want to do something. And that something has a name, and that name is Galactus. You're going to want to do a storyline involving an intergalactic creature called Galactus, who looks like a giant man, wears an ornate helmet, and eats planets. He consumes their life essence. He doesn't actually chew up the rocks and whatnot. He consumes the life essence of living planets. So he's not interested in planetoids or rocks or anything like that. He wants planets that have a biological matrix. Stan Lee is never really clear on what that is. No one else is never really clear on that is, because that is nonsense. There's no such thing as that. There are parameters for life, but you can't eat parameters. Biological energy comes from biology. It comes from living things. So you'd be consuming living things. But the idea of Galactus is that he is not actually a villain. He doesn't consume worlds for the fun of it. He consumes worlds in the way that you consume food. He consumes worlds in order to stay alive. Galactus does what Galactus must to survive, has become a catchphrase with this character. Who likes to talk about himself in the third person even more than I do. And when John Byrne was working on the Fantastic Four, he knew that he needed to do that. He knew that he needed a Galactus story. every comic book, every Marvel comic book is the same way. There's always some signature thing that once you get your hands on the book, you've just got to do. Actually, John Byrne was part of this for the X-Men. For the all-new, all-different X-Men, you could be having a blast, coming up with one plot line after another. Fans loving it every month. But you know, if you're running the book and people are loving it, you know that sooner or later you're going to need Magneto. And John Byrne threw himself into that initial storyline in the all-new, all-different X-Men with one of the greatest reveal panels in the history of comics. You know, it's not the same thing in DC, the home of the real superheroes, but for instance, if you're suddenly given a Superman comic, you know that you need your take on Lex Luthor. If you're given a Batman comic, you need your take on the Joker, even if your take is really, 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 really dumb. Like that the Joker is immortal, or that the Joker is wearing his old skin stapled to his face, or whatever. When it comes to the Fantastic Four, it's Galactus. And sure enough, John Byrne in the 1980s, when all the world made sense, gave us 3 issues that involved Galactus, and also his herald, a bad guy named Terrax. Galactus sends heralds out ahead of himself to scout planetary systems to find out if maybe they can host life. Maybe they'll make a good meal. His most famous herald is the Silver Surfer, who is introduced in the storyline that introduces Galactus, and the Silver Surfer became very popular on his own as a character. Since then, Galactus has been through a couple of other heralds, and Terrax is in many ways the worst of them all. He's bombastic, he's evil, and in this storyline he turns on Galactus. In the first, this is a 3-issue run on this, not a miniseries of any kind, it's just a 3-issue run. In this 3-issue run, he fights the Fantastic Four. See, there's the, let's get a glimpse of the lumpy thing. Why? I have no idea. There's the lumpy thing. He fights the Fantastic Four, but only as a preliminary to what he has in mind, which is twofold. The first thing that he wants to do is use his cosmic axe to cut off the island of Manhattan and raise it up into orbit. Which he does. He can control Earth, so he raises a platform of Earth up to a sufficient vantage point and then slashes the island away from the mainland and up into orbit. And this causes chaos, of course, because there's subway lines, there are tunnels, there's water that's all of a sudden rushing in where there's no roads, no tunnels to protect it. This requires the immediate attention of the Avengers. Right? Because the Fantastic Four live in the Baxter Building. And it's pretty easy to tell exactly where in Manhattan the Baxter Building is. The Avengers live a few blocks to the north in Avengers Mansion, also in Manhattan. And when this catastrophe happens, the Avengers move out. Specifically 2 of them, Thor and Iron Man. At this point in the Avengers roster, the 2 most powerful Avengers. They go to fix, at least temporarily, the problem. Thor plunges into the bay and unleashes a hurricane. Look at this panel. That is just incredible. He unleashes a hurricane that drives back the water of the bay so that Iron Man can get at these tunnels and get all the cars out. See there, Iron Man is lifting the cars out while Thor uses his power to hold back the water. We're told, sealed within his armored shell, Tony Stark suppresses a shudder, feeling suddenly very small and helpless before the might of a living god. This is the second time that John Byrne does this with Thor. He does it in a 2-part story in Marvel Team Up as well, where he has Thor exert himself energy-wise, or control over the storm-wise, and has another Marvel hero just ogle at that much power, and how much power that is. So the Avengers step in to help. But the other thing that Terrax wants, he doesn't just want to cut off the island of Manhattan. He also has a task for the Fantastic Four, who are caught up in all of this. He wants them to help him fight Galactus. He wants them to help him attack his former master. And in the next issue, 243, one of the most popular issues in the John Byrne run, probably the most popular issue, he does that. They fight Galactus. Galactus has come looking for energy which he badly needs. He is dying. He is starving to death. Terrax has not been a very good herald. Hasn't found him much in the way of delicatessen meals. So he's running out of energy. And therefore, according to Terrax, is vulnerable. We get little bits and pieces with the Avengers, Captain America and the Wasp, as they're trying to figure out what's going on. But the main thing that we get is this conference between Terrax and the three members of the Fantastic Four. Sue Riches is not there. And that conference, there's a bubble over Manhattan that is protecting everybody in it from dying immediately in low orbit. But the bubble doesn't extend to where our characters are. That's why they're wearing spacesuits. They're standing on the top of the World Trade Center, which is jutting outside the bubble as it approaches the spaceship of Galactus. We'll get to that. Galactus is, like I mentioned, he is dwindling in energy. And the Fantastic Four go into his spaceship on instructions from Terrax to fight him, or else, or else everyone on Manhattan is going to pay the price. But they don't fight him. Terrax sees no signs of combat, so he rips open Galactus's ship and sees that these characters are just standing there talking to him. And two things happen right away. One is that Galactus immediately undoes the damage that Terrax had caused, puts Manhattan back where it belongs. The other is that he faces his herald and withdraws the extra power that Galactus always gives to his herald. Those beams are not going from Galactus to Terrax. They're going from Terrax to Galactus. He just makes him an ordinary supervillain again. Again, this whole conversation is taking place on top of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, which is pretty melancholy. I was going to Manhattan at the beginning of the 1980s. I don't think by the time this thing came out, but at the beginning of the 1980s, I was going to Manhattan every weekend. And the particular place where I was staying, you walk up the sidewalk over the hill in the neighborhood, you look straight ahead, and the Twin Towers are standing there, just bisecting the view in the distance. It was widely considered that they were indestructible. King Kong climbs on them in the Dino De Laurentiis remake of King Kong. In disaster movies of the time period, a gigantic tidal wave strikes Manhattan and knocks down the Statue of Liberty, destroys the docks, floods all the streets, but it doesn't knock down the World Trade Center. It doesn't knock down the Twin Towers. I think this was 1984, 1985. It would never have occurred to us what was going to happen, what we were going to live to see in the utterly calamitous 21st century. So here it's just a given that Galactus will stand on the Twin Towers. He dispenses with Terrax, but he is still weak. He still needs to feed on the planet. And Reed Richards says, "Galactus, please, I beg you, there are 4 billion souls upon this earth. In the name of humanity, you cannot do this." And Galactus says, "Speak not to me of humanity, Reed Richards. You talked of color to one struck blind. My humanity is lost in the swirling mists of time. Yes, once even Galactus was a man, a mere mortal such as you, though memories of that life are but a dim and dying pain within my heart. The past is done and gone, and mourn it though we may, it cannot be retrieved. So do not speak to me of 4 billion lives. Galactus has seen the end of 40 times 4 billion worlds. Must we know grief for each of these? Had he but tears to cry, Galactus would weep oceans in their memory, and in the end they would still be dead, and madness would at last have claimed me. So I turn my thoughts ever from that path, for the one foot set upon it is a journey thus begun from which no creature ever could return." It's like, yeah, okay. Go on a bit, why don't you? He's a drama queen, but Galactus has always been a drama queen. All people who talk about themselves in the third person are drama queens. He's about to throw the switch when suddenly we hear, "I say thee nay!" A lightning bolt strikes him. Galactus says, "Who?" Well, who do you think, Einstein? It's Thor. Captain America is winging the Avengers Quinjet in close so that Thor can strike at Galactus. And Iron Man is there as well with his repulsor rays. But mainly Thor, who says, "'Tis the son of Odin who doth contend with thee, Galactus, and though in the past hath Thor stood as thy ally at thy side, I shall see thee fall ere this world shall be thine." What Thor is neglecting to mention there is not just that Thor has stood as Galactus' ally in past storylines, in his own comic book, not in the Fantastic Four, but also that Thor has defeated Galactus. When they first meet, in Thor's own comic, drawn by Jack Kirby, Thor defeats Galactus in one-on-one combat. And Galactus isn't weak then. He has no excuse then. But here he is weaker, and Thor attacks him, and we get another great John Byrne panel where Thor is just bombarding him with Asgardian energy attacks. Things that can't be ignored. Thor can't be ignored when he's unleashing his full power like this. And this moment, maybe even this page, certainly the cover of this issue, brought a big smile to long-term Marvel fans' faces. Because the original Stan Lee story, with Galactus attacking the Earth to eat it, to kill everyone on the planet, has the sky turned to fire, or the sky is filled with planetoids and asteroids, because the Watcher is trying to hide the planet from the Silver Surfer, Galactus' herald, who is looking for a world Galactus can consume. And it doesn't work. And eventually, Galactus does arrive on Earth and announces that he intends to eat the planet. And the Fantastic Four get in his way. They fight one of his robot servitors. They briefly fight the Silver Surfer. They end up fighting him. And Marvel Comics fans, this Marvel Comic fan anyway, back then, were thinking, okay, where is everybody else? You, Stan Lee, have created this whole thing where there's continuity and verisimilitude, where all these heroes are living within a 10-block radius of each other in Manhattan. So why is it only the Fantastic Four who are concerned here? Why isn't Thor attacking Galactus in the 1960s, not the 1980s? Why isn't Iron Man? Why isn't the Hulk? Why are the Avengers? The rest of the Avengers, Captain America, Quicksilver, and Hawkeye, can't be expected to do much, but who knows what the Scarlet Witch could do to Galactus? Who knows? Where are all these other people? Why is it that it never even occurs to them in their own comics? Of course, the Stan Lee idea of intertidal continuity hadn't really taken hold then. No one had really run with it. He'd tried his best, but it still makes a great story. But here, there's no pretense of that. There's no chance. In the 1980s, there's no chance that something that happens, a world-ending threat that happens in, I don't even know, the X-Men, isn't going to be known, at least known, to the other titles. And here, the Fantastic Four is joined by the Avengers to fight Galactus. And not just the Avengers. We get this weird, charming scene here. Thor is just fighting Galactus. He's just physically fighting him. But in the background, we have Daredevil and Spider-Man, who are watching the fireworks of this, of Iron Man and Thor just cutting loose to attack Galactus. And they know perfectly well that they can't do anything about it. They're chicken feed. They're nobody to this. It doesn't stop Captain America from getting involved. I can't help but notice. But they actually say, Daredevil says, I wouldn't, Spider-Man says, hiya, Red, time we got involved, wouldn't you say? And Daredevil says, no, Spider-Man, I wouldn't. We're small-time superfolk compared to what's being unleashed down there. We'd just be in the way. It may well be the point where the Avengers and the FF actually do need our help, but to be honest, I don't think much of Earth's chances if it comes down to that. And Spider-Man says, I'm afraid you're right, Daredevil. Guess the most of us can do right now is just wait and watch. Too bad we don't have any popcorn. Which is a classic John Byrne thing. He was fond of this little moments like this of what we'd call realism. He was fond of little moments like that. If you see Thor cutting loose against Galactus and your superpower is that you can wear red leotards, you're not going to get involved. But somebody else does get involved. While the big guns are unleashing energy attacks on Galactus, we see Doctor Strange appear. A very Steve Ditko-esque quasi-oriental Doctor Strange. In his own recent appearances in Marvel Comics, Doctor Strange no longer looked like this. With, I think, even yeah, John, you're not going to be able to make it out all that much. John Byrne even gives him the spotted gloves from the Steve Ditko era. Just a complete throwback. And Doctor Strange casts a spell on Galactus that makes him wave his arms and scream. And we later learn it's the images of Icon, where he is showing Galactus the spirits of all the dead people that he just mentioned. And it's too much for him. And while he is reeling, the Fantastic Four, appropriately enough, gets in the final blow. Reed Richards stretches himself like a catapult and catapults the lumpy thing straight at Galactus's face, and it knocks him over. And he is lying there on the ground, getting smaller as his energy reserves are depleted, when Reed Richards realizes that they have to save him. They can't just stand around and watch him die. He's a person. They have to let him. They have to try their best to save his life. Frida does what Frida must to survive. Then we move on to the next issue. Oh, God. All right. Well, this is 80s, and this is also John Byrne, so you're going to get stuff like this. John Byrne had such a liking for leg warmers. I have no idea what that was all about. He just couldn't get enough of leg warmers. Some of you will remember Flashdance. Some of you remember leg warmers, but I'm hoping most of you don't. They see this kind of work here. That is the splash page of this issue. No, the credits are in the broken rubble. That is just amazing. That is, I mean, I have my problems with John Byrne, but props to him. They create a device that will save Galactus, that will siphon energy from Thor's hammer into Galactus and keep him alive in an energy harness of some kind. We're told that the device is suddenly sucking more of Thor's energy than he wants, and we're told even before Thor himself has fully realized his predicament, the star-spangled veteran of 1,000 battles has moved instinctively. And Captain America throws his shield to disable the machine. Thor is a veteran of a lot more than 1,000 battles. I think he could probably take care of himself. But it works. The device restores Galactus to life. And Reed Richards uses advanced astrotechnology to find planets that have a biological matrix that will sustain Galactus's life. But Galactus says it doesn't really matter because I'm too weak to get there. I'm too weak to find out which of them is a good match. I need a herald, and I don't have one. I've just demoted Terrax. And that's when we get Frankie Ray. She is Johnny Storm, the Human Torch's current girlfriend. She gains flame powers of her own. She gains flame powers of her own and becomes a kind of de facto member of the Fantastic Four for a few issues. And she tells Galactus that you don't need to give me any powers. I have powers of my own, and I will be your herald. And Galactus takes her up on the offer. See that? Another great John Byrne panel there. He takes her up on the offer. But the Fantastic Four has quabbles about this, as well they should. She tells Galactus that she's been reading up on him. At first, when Galactus appears in these issues, she doesn't believe he's real. And it's John Byrne's implication that maybe a lot of people in the Marvel Universe don't believe that it was ever real. That whatever it was, it certainly wasn't Galactus. It makes you remember that the whole original storyline with Galactus takes place on top of the Baxter Building. So it's possible that most people don't believe this guy ever showed up and tried to eat the world. But Reed Richards says, I don't think you understand what you're doing, Frankie. As the Herald of Galactus, it would be your task to find worlds to feed his constant hunger. And I fear there are few planets with life-sustaining energy, but no life itself. There would inevitably come a time when you would have to lead him to an inhabited world. And she says, so? A few less bug-eyed monsters? What's that compared to being able to go out there? Galactus transforms her into his latest herald, Nova, and she flies off into the universe. Johnny Storm is saying, Frankie, oh babe, what has he done to you? And Reed Richards says, careful, Johnny, I think there's very little of Frankie Ray left there. And she responds, she corrects Reed Richards and says, you're wrong, Reed. I'm still Frankie Ray, but newer, better, and I'm free. And this also, here we get a panel that might as well be taken from the X-Men. This is a very similar thing. Like the leg warmers, this is also a trait of John Byrne, is that he likes to either turn a female character into an uncaring and slightly malevolent, incredibly overpowered version of themselves, or reveal that they were always that way. It's not Nova that says, so what if bug-eyed monsters die by their millions, innocent people? It's Frankie Ray that says that. It's John Byrne, he does it again later with Sue Richards herself. It's a gimmick of his that women are not to be trusted. That all women have the potential to go rogue and fly off to kill people. Whether it's Sue Richards or Frankie Ray, or the most famous example, the Phoenix, Jean Grey in the X-Men. She flies off to join with Galactus. Johnny Storm chases after her. Here we get a preview of the one recurring kind of visual gimmick from Fantastic Four movies. As far as I know, it's been in every Fantastic Four movie, and it's in the preview for the upcoming Fantastic Four movie, where the Torch flies too high and runs out of oxygen for his flame and has to fall back to Earth. The roasting tobacco addict who plays Johnny Storm in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie has a scene where he does that. I know that it's a great moment, where you fall back to Earth. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Johnny Storm's flame obviously cannot need oxygen. That's not how any of this would work. But I was complaining about that with the original Human Torch long before this, so it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter for that Fantastic Four movie anyway. I have a screener for it. But I'm not going to watch a Fantastic Four movie in which the Silver Surfer is a woman. This is an iconic storyline that thousands and thousands and thousands of people have loved over decades. If you're going to diversity swap it, then you're going to do it without me. But anyway, the Galactus watches her go and then leaves himself on the carrier Nimbus that will take him to what remains of his ship, I guess. Why can't take him to another world? Why he needs a herald at all, I don't know. But he tells, before he goes, he says that that this is more than just a visit to Earth. He's visited Earth a number of times before. In a footnote in this issue, we are told that the last two times he was defeated by an Earth superhero, it was Dazzler and Rom, the Space Knight. Because Galactus can be overused. But he says that unlike those other times, he is now swearing off Earth and eating Earth because he thinks the Fantastic Four are his friends. He feels that they are his friends. And aside from a little secondary action setting up the remaining storylines for the next arc of this year, that is this issue. Reed Richards buys the Baxter Building, and Tony Stark, Iron Man, contracts to rebuild the destroyed parts of the Baxter Building. He doesn't do it for free. He's doing it for money, but he's doing it for less money than Reed was being charged for other people. And that is basically it. That is the Galactus storyline. He comes to Earth. He decides to eat the Earth, and then decides that if you can find me planets that have a life-sustaining matrix, I'll consume those worlds instead. And does. So it's John Byrne kind of wrapping up the idea of Galactus continually being a threat to Earth. It's also John Byrne wrapping up one lame-ass herald and giving Galactus another lame-ass herald. But the main thing about these issues, the thing that I think Mike picked them for, is that it's to correct a long-standing omission on the part of Marvel Comics and have Marvel's superheroes defeat Galactus, or at least fight Galactus, instead of just the Fantastic Four. Which is kind of neat. You could do it even bigger than this. What about a Galactus who isn't starving to death? A Galactus who isn't weak, facing even more heroes? Doctor Strange, sure, but what about the Silver Surfer? What about some other powerful Avengers? What about the X-Men? Of course, the X-Men has, with Chris Claremont writing, had another allusion to this. Not so much to this issue because it hadn't been written yet, but to this whole fact. At one point, an alien warship is approaching Earth, and they're conducting a scan. They're doing an information readout about the planet, and they realize that the planet has faced Galactus 3 times in its recent history and beaten him back all 3 times. And the captain of the ship is horrified when he hears that and immediately turns his ship around. It doesn't go any further because that is serious. That is some serious trouble. You kind of wonder if Doctor Strange is this effective against Galactus, what would Professor X be like against him? But anyway, these are those issues. Finally, the Fantastic Four gets a little help from other people in facing off against Galactus. In what a lot of people would call a highlight of Byrne's run on the Fantastic Four, John Byrne's run on the Fantastic Four has one of those big hardcover anthologies, those big omnibus volumes. I'm sure at least one. I think it has at least one. I know it has one because I used to have it. But it was such a trouble to manipulate that I eventually got rid of it. I wish I hadn't. I've acclimated to those things now. I got a huge Superman anthology, twice the size of the John Byrne omnibus. And you just sit there and put a pillow on your lap and read it carefully. There, you can't walk around with it. Can't travel anywhere with it. You can't pick it up casually. But you can read it. So now I'm thinking back to all those omnibus volumes that I've had and wishing that I still had them, no matter how much space they take up. But I'm sure that Michael K. Vaughan has that omnibus, at least one. So you'll be able to see it in his video. And I'll leave a link to his video down below. But that's our pick for today. Very painless stuff. John Byrne on the Fantastic Four is pretty painless. Pretty good. Pretty great stuff. A great run. We'll see what he picks next time. I'll be there right along with you. And Hannah, of course. Thank you, BookTube.